I just want us to be honest about what we're really, really thinking.
What's really, really going on in our society?
Let's just have a dialogue and move the conversation forward.
There's things that people are thinking about every day in their commutes from work,
At their office, and they're just not having the conversation.
It's not about being right or wrong,
I can't talk about things that I don't know. I can only talk about my experiences.
as long as we're talking about it. That's the most important thing.
The other day, I was thinking about a message that I got from my friend, Nicole Magabo. Nicole wrote me and said that she had been listening to some of my previous podcasts. And she said, check out a podcast called Business Dad. So I checked it out. And Business Dad is a podcast about an American tech investor. And he started this podcast because he had kids. He had a kid. And after having the child for about 2 years after that, he was, going on TV, being interviewed, doing his normal job, tech commentating and whatever. And he said it wasn't until 2 years after having his first child that in all of the interviews he had been doing, that somebody asked him, how does it feel to be a father? And how has being a father affected your productivity or your work? And it was in that moment that it dawned on this guy, I forget his name, that men don't get asked, because he explains how people ask his wife all the time, how's it going? How's it been since you had the baby? How's everything going? But nobody asked him. And he then continued in the podcast. He interviews different people that have had children and how having children has affected them. I think a lot about the psychology of the modern man. In a time where gender roles are as fluid as ever and the role men play in society is under more scrutiny than it's ever been, all my thoughts converge around a single question. What type of fathers do we want to be? Men, and particular African men, do not always have the spaces where they can explain or express their feelings and their insecurities on any subject, but particularly on the issue of fatherhood. In the time that I have been a father, which is just over a year now, there haven't been a lot of conversations that I've had with other dads about how being a dad has made them feel. There'll be conversations about the stresses of being a father, the financial burdens of being a father, but very rarely are any of those conversations about how being a father has made them feel or how it has affected them. Society and convention will push you towards any point along the spectrum. It might be on one end where you're the alpha male provider, you don't feel anything, your job is to just make sure that the house is taken care of. Or it might be somewhere else on the spectrum, to be sensitive, be there for your child and be nurturing and caring and have an emotional bond. Or you can be somewhere in between. And to me, it doesn't actually really matter which one of those dads you choose to be. The thing that I think is important is the choice. You should be choosing your truth and living it. So I will say this. Fatherhood is hard. It's very, very hard. When my wife and I had our first child that was born prematurely, we were advised by our pediatrician to go and see a psychologist because of the effects that parents that have premature children go through. The one thing that stuck with me from what the therapist said is that postpartum depression in fathers, studies have shown, is far, far worse than postpartum depression in the mothers. And the postpartum depression in the fathers manifests itself a lot later. And there's a combination of reasons why this happens. During the pregnancy, the attention, as it should be, is on the mother and her well-being. After the child is born, there is a time of adjustment where you're adjusting to having this new person in the house. The mother is the primary caregiver, so the husband's issues or feelings, or the father's feelings might be pushed to the side for the time being. So what tends to happen is that there are a lot of these feelings that are being suppressed or being put to the side. And then what you have is that you have fathers exhibiting the symptoms of depression when the child is 5 or 6 years old. And it's very difficult to draw a straight line between the behavior of the father after 5 years and where it actually came from. A conversation that needs to be had, though, by all people that are having children is the dynamics that are at play. There is the relationship that you as the man have with the mother of the child. There's the relationship that you, the man, has with the child. And then there is the relationship that the three of you have as a unit. Those are three completely separate relationships that all need to be nurtured and taken care of on their own. The management of these relationships is vital. And if you are not conscious of what's going on, it can be detrimental to everything. I have a friend who is dealing with the mismanagement of these dynamics much, much later. When him and his partner first had a child, everything that he did was wrong. He tried to change the diaper. You don't do it that way. He tried to pick up the child. No, you don't do it that way. He tried to soothe the child. No, you don't do it that way. There was so much insecurity about looking after his own child. So what happened? What happened was the way that the relationships formed was that he doesn't know how to do it. The mother should do it. He has these insecurities. So what tends to happen? What happens is that as time goes by, he feels inadequate in the house. So certain roles start to be set in the house. So now, caring for the child, picking up the child, changing the child's diapers, that is no longer his role. So his role is that he's going to make sure that there's diapers in the house, there's food in the fridge, everybody's taken care of. But then that creates a distance between him and his spouse and him and his child. And what that then created was a scenario where he didn't want to be at the house anymore, because every time he's at home, all he feels is inadequacy. And in a very private conversation with me, he revealed to me and said, he was like, as messed up as this may sound, Twape, because of this child, I want my wife back. I want the person who used to care about what I think and what I said. I want that person back, and the child has taken that away from me. What fatherhood will lead you to do is it will lead you to think things that you are afraid to say out loud because of how irrational or how insensitive those things may seem. So now he doesn't want to go home. So what does he do? What he does is that when he leaves work, he goes drinking. Because if I go drinking, by the time I get home, everybody's asleep. Everybody's asleep. I don't feel inadequate. And then you rinse and repeat, and you rinse and repeat, and you rinse and repeat. The long-term effect of this is that your relationship with the mother of the child is being affected because of the distance. The relationship with the child is being affected because of the distance. And this behavior keeps getting perpetuated. I see so many men, myself included, that once these pressures of fatherhood start to hit and you don't know how to deal with those issues, you start to direct the energy into something else. Drinking, workaholic, gym freak, womanizer, drug abuser. The outlet can be anything, but the source of it, those are symptoms, but the root cause of it is what is not being dealt with. So you fast forward to 4 years on now. The child is now 4 years old. Because of this routine that has been set up, he doesn't pick up his child. He doesn't hold his child. That's not his role. Now, what has happened on the other side, on the flip side, is that now the wife is complaining. Oh, my husband doesn't spend any time with the kid. He barely even holds the child, whatever. Now, what you've got now is a situation where these people have completely split apart. It's 4 years on, and nobody can say, or no one is actually having the honest communicative conversation to say, we're having these problems because 4 years ago, you made me feel inadequate for not being able to change a diaper. Now, let's stop right there. The conversation that I'm trying to have is not one to make the husband, the father, the victim. Because one thing that is very, very true is that it is a lot harder for a woman to be pregnant, have a child, and look after the child, physically and emotionally. However, while that may be true, there are a lot of men that are exhibiting all this behavior, which they're not stopping to intellectualize and say, why am I actually behaving this way? Because as inadequate or insecure or unwanted as you may feel as the man, I bet you that if you take some time to actually go and speak to your partner, they have some things that they're going through too. But the point is that you need to make the choice to communicate those things. It isn't about right or wrong. It isn't about my feelings are bigger or my feelings are worse or all my wife does is complain or any of that. No, that is not the point. We as men need to decide where decide where we want to show up and what type of fathers that we want to be. What ideals do we want to pass on? The first and most important thing is to be honest with yourself, honest with your spouse, and honest with your child. If you grew up a certain way and your father treated you a certain way, is that the kind of father that you want to now be to your child? Maybe yes, maybe no. Do you want to change the narrative? Do you want to change how, when you were a child, how it felt? I see a lot of fathers who want to be absent. That's fine. I see a lot of fathers that want to be present. That's fine. But let it be a choice. Don't let it be unconscious. Don't let it be something that just happened because 4 years ago you didn't deal with it. And now all you're saying is, I want my wife back. But this is just my observation about how men, especially African men, are treating fatherhood. This is what I think. I think that we're not being vulnerable and we're not being insecure and we're not having an opportunity to discuss how we feel. I would love to hear from both men and women. Whether you've had a child or not, what have your observations been on these dynamics that I'm talking about? How many of us men are having conversations with ourselves or with our friends about the pressures of fatherhood? How many women are stopping to look at the people that are the father of their children and say, this guy might also be going through something, let me try and talk to him? And how many of us actually have formed relationships where communication like that can even take place? Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, at Twape. I'd love to hear from you all. Until next time, take it easy.